You've seen this picture a million times, right? Machu Picchu? It's just iconic. A city floating in the clouds, an absolute marvel of engineering that's had historians scratching their heads for centuries. But the real mystery, the one that's way bigger than how they built it, is what happened to all the people who lived there. I mean, for almost 500 years, it was like they just vanished. Poof, gone into thin air. A whole thriving community just gone without a trace. It's seriously one of history's biggest, coldest cases. But here's the thing. That's all changing. Because now, thanks to some pretty incredible forensic science, the ghosts of Machu Picchu, well, they're finally starting to talk. And let me tell you, the story they're telling, it is not what anyone expected. So let's start with the clues they left behind. Okay, so our investigation is going to start right where their story ended. We're going high up on that mountain to the scene of the crime, so to speak, and we're going to talk to the only witnesses left, the silent, skeletal remains of the very last people who lived there. And right away, the evidence up there paints a really confusing picture. On one hand, you've got hundreds of skeletons, so you know a lot of people lived here. But, and this is a big but, a whole lot of those skeletons show signs of really violent trauma. We're talking fractured skulls. This was not a peaceful pack your bags and leave kind of situation. No, this was something else, something much, much darker. So, to really get to the bottom of this, to figure out who these people were and what really happened, archaeologists had to bring in the big guns, a tool that can literally look back in time, ancient DNA analysis. Okay, so let's break that down. Think of something called mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA for short. It's kind of like a family heirloom that gets passed down inside our cells, but it only comes from your mother. And it gets passed down almost perfectly, generation after generation. It creates this amazing genetic breadcrumb trail that scientists can follow all the way back, centuries and centuries, to figure out where your ancestors came from. And the process itself, it's super meticulous. Scientists take these tiny, tiny samples from the bones and teeth, and they have to be so careful to isolate this super fragile ancient DNA. Then they map out the unique genetic markers, and once they have that map, they can compare it to big databases of different populations, and boom, they can pinpoint pretty much exactly where on Earth these people's ancestors came from. And when the results from this DNA investigation came in, wow, they didn't just add a new chapter to the story of Machu Picchu, they threw the whole book out and started over. See, for the longest time, everyone thought Machu Picchu was this exclusive, secluded retreat just for Incan royalty, the elites. But the DNA, it tells a completely different story. These weren't elites, not at all. It was a total melting pot. The DNA showed that people came from literally every corner of the massive Incan Empire. You had people whose families came from the deep Amazon jungle, others from way up in the Andean highlands, and even more from the coastal regions, hundreds of miles away. Machu Picchu wasn't a royal hideaway. It was this bustling, cosmopolitan hub filled with skilled workers and artisans. Yeah, the researchers themselves said it best. The genetics revealed a community of laborers. These were the people who actually built and took care of this incredible place. But think about what that means. With such diverse origins, they weren't one big family or a single tribe. In many ways, they were strangers, all brought together by the might of the Incan Empire. So, okay, the DNA told us who they were, but the bones told us how it all ended, and it was brutal. Remember those fractured skulls we mentioned? Yeah, there were way, way too many of them for it to be some kind of accident. Get this, 30%. Nearly a third of all the skeletons they looked at showed these fractured cranial injuries. That is a huge number. And in forensic terms, that's the signature of vicious close quarters fighting. It's the kind of damage you see from weapons of war. This city didn't just fade away. It was attacked. So now we have this completely new and much more dramatic story, right? We've got a diverse community of workers, not royals. And we have clear evidence of a violent end. And when you put those two huge clues together with what we know about history, the truth of what happened to them starts to become crystal clear. It really all comes down to timing. The abandonment of Machu Picchu lines up perfectly with the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors and the total bloody collapse of the Incan Empire. We're talking the early 1530s. You had disease, civil war, and Spanish weapons just ripping their entire world apart. And that's what leads to the city being abandoned just a few years later. So let's lay out the case, just like a detective would. What was the threat? Spanish invasion and the collapse of the entire empire. What's the hard evidence? The fractured skulls and that diverse DNA showing that these people didn't have a single shared homeland to run back to. So what's the conclusion? They were attacked, violently, and they were trapped. So the survivors, they did the only thing they could. They made a desperate run for it, into the one place some of them knew well, the Amazon jungle right next door, the very place their DNA said some of them came from. You have to understand, this was so much more than just an evacuation. The empire that had brought all these different people together, it was gone. The entire world as they knew it was shattered. When they fled Machu Picchu, they weren't just fleeing a place, they were fleeing the end of their world. So, let's wrap this mystery up. The people of Machu Picchu, they weren't royals. They were a diverse group of the empire's best craftspeople. They didn't just quietly fade away. They were driven out by terrible violence connected to the Spanish invasion. And here's the biggest takeaway. They didn't just vanish. They escaped. They melted into the Amazon jungle, where it's very likely their descendants are still living to this day. It's amazing, right? This forensic investigation has literally given a voice to people who were lost to history for 5 centuries. It really makes you wonder, if science can solve a 500-year-old cold case like this, what other lost stories are just out there, buried, waiting for us to uncover them?